Welcome, everybody, to Night of the Nerdy Laser podcast. I'm your host, as always, Richard. I am the master of hunting and the champion of shunting, Yule.
And I'm Jeff Lamb.
And this is the road to FrankenCon. We've been on this road for the past few weeks, and we are stepping into the shoes of society from 1989. And not just me and Jeff are here today. We are joined by somebody who has become a good friend of mine, and I couldn't be more happy. And you know him from Bunt from Pumpkinhead. You know him from Pinot, A Silent Night, Deadly Night, Part 5, The Toy Maker. And of course, Martin in Society. Mr. Brian Bremer, how are you, sir?
Hello, Jeff. Hello, Richard. How are you both? Good to see
We
you
are
both.
awesome. Yeah, thank you, buddy, for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know you do a little bit of everything these days, so I never know where you're at.
Me neither. I don't know where I'm at right now. I have no idea. I
I
loved your
see you.
introductions.
I see
love
you got Pumpkinhead behind you.
He's always behind me. Always behind me. He's coming to FrankenCon. We'll be
Yeah.
there in 2 weeks. I can't wait. That's my favorite show. That and Scarefest are my favorite shows. So
Yeah, mine too. That's probably the
right.
order I would go too. Yeah. So Brian is, from Society. So we've done Pumpkinhead and we've done Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 5. So we figured we'd talk a little bit about Society later. But I've never actually been able to interview you in a way. So I just kind of
That's
want
true.
to talk. And yeah, we always just, we've had
Hang out.
drinks before and hung out and stuff, but it's kind of cool. So what was it like? I mean, you had a wild ride those 4 or 5 years. I mean, you had Pumpkinhead, then you had Society, and you had Silent Night, and uh, Spontaneous Combustion, and working with like Brian Usna and Toby Hooper and just everybody. Like, I mean, that was just a crazy ride. How did Bunt come along? Did that movie spark everything?
No, it's really funny. Everybody thinks it did because there's a weird natural progression. I worked with Stan Winston, then I worked with Brian Yuzna twice because he really was the man behind Silent Night 5. If you watch that movie, you see his touch all over it.
Oh yeah.
And then I worked with Toby Hooper, and they were all in pretty rapid succession, I guess maybe a 2 or 3 year period, but none were related to the other. I was out there in LA, just a young working actor hustling and going to auditions. In fact, when I got Pumpkinhead, I auditioned in like a strip mall in Van Nuys, and the callback was in the same strip mall upstairs, and that's where I met Stan Winston, and the rest of the cast was there for the callback at that point. But I booked the part. And I remember my agent at the time, he called me in his office and he's like, well, it's a horror movie, kid. Everybody's got to do one. Yeah, I'm like, okay. Well, I love the genre. And I thought the script was great. And I thought, like, have you read the script? Plus, it was Stan Winston. And
Yeah.
a little bit of a benefit of naivete at the time, you guys, because I was very young. Well, I was 20. And I loved horror movies growing up, but I didn't know who Stan was at that time. I knew his name. I knew Toby's name. I knew Brian, but I didn't really know who they were in the genre or who they'd become,
Sure.
So I had the benefit, and I take that in my acting now with my voice acting and the on camera that I'll do now. I try not to ever get starstruck or intimidated by the people I meet, because you meet, I've worked for a lot of people. But I did Pumpkinhead, and then it was another audition to get Society. In fact, I remember being on the soundstage for Society. I think it was like the second or third day, and I was sitting on the couch hanging out waiting to shoot. And Yuzna comes up to me and he comes down behind the couch. He goes, "You're that kid from Pumpkinhead, aren't you?" Yeah. So like he knew the movie, but he didn't know. I mean, he cast me because of the audition.
Oh, but he didn't know you were. Oh.
Not till I got there. And then he's like, "Oh, you're that guy from Pumpkinhead, aren't you?" Really cute. So yeah, really every single movie I got was a completely independent audition. Now, I don't know if at a certain point my resume didn't help me with some of these folks.
Yeah.
Like Toby Hooper and I became really, really close friends. And if I'd stayed in LA, I think we would have stayed friends to this day. Of course, he passed away. But I went to his house for dinner. I remember going to his house, and he had the mock-up of the Mangler Remember the movie The Mangler?
Oh, yep.
Huge mock-up of the model of the Mangler sitting on his dining room table because he was in production for the Mangler. I thought, this is wild. And we actually, at his house, we watched the rough cut of the movie he made with Robert Englund as the Marquis de Sade. That's been called a couple of different things in different countries, and I can't remember the name of it, but he had just had the rough cut, and he sat us all down. It was me and my friend Stan and Tony, his son, Tony Hooper, in his living room in Bel Air, and the screen comes down out of the ceiling. He's like, we're going to watch this movie. Sorry, everybody's smoking in my stories, but he's
it's the 80s.
It was the 80s, right? And he had that famous cigar he always chewed on. And Dr. Pepper, was it Dr. Pepper in the cigar? He always drank some kind of soft drink. But we watched the rough cut of the Marquis de Sade movie. I wish I could remember. The first year I was at Scarefest, somebody actually brought Robert a poster from that movie. And apparently, like, oh my God. But we watched it, and afterwards Toby goes, well, what'd you think? And we're like, it was great. I mean, what do you say? But it really was. I mean, he's such an interesting director, and I think he's so underappreciated in so many ways. Every movie you watch, when you know his style, you completely recognize that it's a Tobe Hooper film. From the original Texas Chainsaw all the way to Spontaneous Combustion, even Poltergeist. Spielberg gets a lot of credit for producing that. If you know Toby's camera work and his angles and the way he uses space and color, you can totally see that Poltergeist is a Tobe Hooper movie. So I really always admired him and always admired his style. But yeah, that was kind of a wild ride. It really was. I guess the whole thing is I didn't really know it was happening when it was happening. And then years later, when all these movies started to get really popular through cable or streaming and now Tubi and all the places people are finding the movies, it's just wild that they still live and have this life and they stand up, which is crazy. I saw Pumpkinhead at the screening, in Asheville with Orbit. And that was the first time I'd seen it. Yeah, that was great. My nephew was there, my little 7-year-old nephew, and he was just like, oh, it was great. He wants to be an actor now. I told his mom. Yes, to be a dentist. But that was the first time I'd seen that movie with an audience since it came out in the 80s. I saw it at the premiere in Westwood, but then, it's home video. It's on HBO. It's like you're watching it maybe with your friend, but I saw it with a full packed, sold out audience for the first time since the premiere. And it was funny because that audience reacted exactly the same way last year as they did 35 years ago. In all the same places and with all the same moments and all the same emotions. And that's just stunning to me because it's such a testament to Stan Winston and his film and Boyan, the director of photography, and the performances. I'm not talking about me, but all the performances are really solid. Like Stan was a really good director. But the movies have stood up, and now people keep finding Society. That was weird. When I first came to FrankenCon 3 years ago, I had people coming up to the table for Society, and I was stunned because I guess Joe Bob showed it on the drive-in.
Oh, yeah.
But people just recently have started finding that. And recently, as in like, for the past 20 some years, people have talked to me about Pumpkinhead. But in the past 4 or 5 years, people have started talking about Society, and it's just crazy how a movie can be that old and find its life and its audience
later.
A whole new era. Yeah.
Street Trash is kind of like that for me. Like I just discovered Street Trash, like, I don't know what, Jeff, 3 or 4 years ago. And I don't know how I missed it. Like that is a fantastic, like that's a character study of practical effects. I mean, it's amazing.
All right. Yeah.
That movie is Night Terrors, by the way. I looked up that movie. I cheated and
Night Terrors. That's right. It was originally called something else, but that's I think the title it ended up with. That's the Marquis de Sade movie with Robert Englund as the Marquis de Sade. If you haven't seen it, find it and check
I haven't seen it. And it's funny you mentioned the Mangler. Jeff picked it for we're going to do that in 2 weeks.
Yeah,
we're going to talk about the Mangler.
Richard's like, what's the Mangler? And I was like,
I've never
how
seen
do you not know the Mangler? Like, I was like, you're going to love it. I'm not telling you anything about it yet.
Yeah, that's a really good movie. Tobe has so many movies, like even Spontaneous Combustion, that are just kind of like the lost Tobe Hooper films. Like only the diehard fans of Tobe have seen those films or know those films. The Mangler was pretty popular, though. I remember that.
Yeah.
that made kind of a
I've heard of it. I mean, and I remember seeing it in the video store, but I don't know. Just there's so many movies that escaped me over my life, Brian. People,
Yeah, me
it's
too.
so funny. I was at wrestling Friday night, and somebody knew I was from FrankCon, and they were like, "Oh, I've been watching some horror movies." I was like, "That's cool." And he was like, "Have you seen Abigail?" And I was like, "No, I haven't seen it yet." And he's like, "Have you seen?" Like he named off like 4 movies, and I was like, "I haven't seen any of those, man. I'm sorry."
Were they all newer?
Some of them were, but there was one that was kind of older, but I was like, if it's, I mean, FrankenCon is like eating up so much of my time. Like, I want to see Abigail so bad, and I want to
I've
go to the
heard it's
movies.
good.
But yeah, I've heard really good things about Abigail.
Yeah, and on the point of talking about the movies now, people are still discovering them. I mean, I discovered them probably at way too young of an age, but like
I'm hearing a lot.
yeah,
I'm hearing that from a lot of people.
yeah. But I mean, that's what made me fall in love with the genre and just movies in general. I tell Richard, '88, is like one of the best years for horror films. Like, there's just so many good ones that come out, and right in my wheelhouse. And I was born in '88 too, so can't complain.
Oh my God.
So did
Oh my God. No, I agree with 100%. And it was the same for me, Jeff. I mean, my era would be like the mid 70s, early 70s, but Texas Chainsaw, The Exorcist, the original Halloween, like those were the movies that got me into the genre. And I have the same connection. And it's funny because at Scarefest last year, I got to meet Nick Castle.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
Story about the first time I saw Halloween, and I realized, oh my God, this is like ingrained in me. He is like my scary Walt Disney. You know what I mean? And it's funny when people come to my table and say they saw Pumpkinhead when they were 10, 11 years old, or 6 or 7 years old, and they feel the same way about that movie. Like it has a place in our experience, in our culture. I can think about the first time I saw the original Halloween, and I can go right back to that place, to that lodge in the Great Smoky Mountains, in the office by myself, watching a little black and white TV, in the middle of the night, and being scared to death seeing that movie.
Yeah.
And I remember that, and that makes me remember being with my mother and my grandmother on the trip. And I mean, it made an impression because I love the genre. Same as you, Jeff.
Yeah, and I mean, it's funny that you said your mom and grandma, because that's my grandma would just rent me whatever I wanted. She just, what do you want to watch? I'd be like, let's get that Jason part 5 or whatever. She's like, all right, let's go get it.
Here, Jeffy boy.
Yeah,
was your grandmother a horror fan, or was she just getting you what you wanted?
Just gave me what I wanted.
That's good.
She was a good grandma. She was a good grandma. Yeah.
I wish I had discovered Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 5 years back when I was a kid, because I love that movie now.
It's a good one. I wish many people had discovered it many years
ago. Yeah, I know. It's weird because nobody talks about that one, and it's really one of the better ones out of the series, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's picking
usually
up
people put it people put it as second or third. I mean,
yeah, it's picking up traction for sure.
Yeah,
because a lot of people don't like the second one, and they don't like the third or fourth one. The fourth one is not great. I don't like. But it should work, but I don't think it does.
I've only seen the first one and mine, and I only saw mine because we watched it at the FrankenCon event last year.
Oh, that's funny. That's the first time you had ever seen it?
Not ever, but in a long
in a long time.
When I first started making movies, I had an issue with watching myself, and I still do, and I think a lot of actors do. It's
sure.
I do that with the show.
It's the same.
I don't want to listen to me, but then I have to edit it, so I'm like, well, I have no choice.
Everybody, and a lot of actors too. Now, some actors do like watching themselves, and they evaluate their performance. I'm over that now. I do like watching myself. I like seeing what I do, but I'm a mature actor now, so I know the process. I know what works for me, and I always am curious to see if, all right, well, did what I intend to do actually come across?
Yeah.
So when the movie went straight to video, I don't remember if I watched it or not. I might have watched it once, But again, that's a movie, Silent Night 5. It was straight to video, so I've never seen it with an audience until last year.
Yeah,
and saw it with that big room full of people, and that was really fun. And I'm proud of that. I was in touch with Brian Yosno very recently, because I work in film development too, and he had a script, and I wanted to get it in front of somebody, and we got to reconnect and talk for a while. And he talked about the cons, because he does them too,
yeah,
from time to time. And we talked about how just amazed we were that Silent Night 5 was getting that kind of traction and that Society had that traction. We had a lot of fun reminiscing. I hope I get to see him out at a show, and I'd like to work with him again. He's another interesting one where we hadn't talked in years, and as soon as we got on the phone, it was just like you're back to that same dynamic. I think because when you do a movie, it's like doing conventions.
Yeah.
You know, as soon as you and I get together, it's just like no time has passed because they're such bonding experiences. So
Yeah, I mean, you're trying to make something, whatever it is. I mean, whether it's a podcast or convention or movie or whatever, you're doing it because you want to do it and you want it to succeed. So,
right.
you just have this common interest, and I mean, it does build a camaraderie.
It does. Yeah, especially your show. FrankenCon is such a family. It really is a Franken family. And every year, it's been great to see it grow every year. And, from the first year to the second year. And then I'm really excited about this year because a lot of the same people come, but then there's always a brand new horde of people that are finding it. And once they find it, they're hooked. So I'm really grateful to you guys. And I'm really glad.
Yeah, no, I mean, we, the first year, we found Peter, and he was helping us with the nightmare thing, and then he mentioned you. I mean, you weren't really on our radar just because we were new. We didn't know what we were doing. Nobody really was on our radar.
Richard. If people are fans of Pumpkinhead, they're like, "Oh, that's cool." But if they're not, they're like, "Who?"
Well, I mean, once we figured out like you were in Society and like Silent Night and all that, and you've done your voice work now. I mean, you've done the is it Tall Tales Walking Dead?
Tales Walking Dead video game season 2. I'm Nick.
Yeah. So I mean, that's really cool. And I mean, you teach stuff and you do voiceover stuff, and I mean, you're kind of a do everything now. And I just think
you gotta hustle in this business.
It is true. I do. Yeah, I do agree with the hustle thing. You do.
That's showbiz. My main focus now is voice acting. That's why I've had a lot of success the last 20 years of my career as a voice actor, mainly commercials. That's where I really made my mark with big national campaigns, and then got into animation, and I've done a couple of animated series, and then I booked the Walking Dead video game. And that was kind of a game changer for that world. But I would still say the majority of work that I do in the voice acting world is commercial, but that's also 75% of the work that's out there. It's where a lot of the good money is. But now I'm starting to get into audiobooks. The wonderful thing about voice,
you can do so much.
Yeah, you can. There's so many genres. A lot of people think it's just animation. It's so not. And I have really good friends who are very successful animation actors, like Bob Bergen, who's the voice of Porky Pig. If you guys are interested in voice acting, just go to his website, Bob Bergen, BERGEN.com. Follow him on social. He loves to teach. He loves to share his information. He's $1 million animation voice actor. He is the voice of Porky Pig and Tweety Bird. When Mel Blanc died, he always wanted to be those characters. Wow. And he did it, and he is that character. He still will do a Coca-Cola commercial. He'll do a Home Depot industrial. He do because it's work.
Yeah.
Same with Dave Fennoy, who's a big video game actor. He was at a conference that I was speaking at. He was speaking at a couple of years ago, and we were having breakfast, and he had to go upstairs and audition for a Home Depot industrial. He's like, well, of course, it's $2,000. Of course I'm going to do it. So there is so much in the voice acting world that people don't think about or know about. And when they start to learn about how much is out there with narration and e-learning and show narration and audiobooks, what I love about it is this doesn't matter at all. And I work from home every single day. And no matter what genre I have pierced, so to speak, there's always something else I can learn. So far, always something else to go to. So I fell in love with voice acting. That's why with on camera, I will still audition for on camera if I'm asked to audition, and I sometimes do get asked to audition, and so I end up doing a couple of films a year or a film every couple of years. But the cool thing about doing the cons is I've gotten to meet all these really awesome indie horror filmmakers and have partnered with some of them, and I've got a couple coming up, and that's sort of reawakened my love of on camera acting because I started in the theater.
Yeah.
Did a bunch of movies and TV shows, then found voiceover and kind of never looked back. but it's kind of it's almost like I was telling Beatrice Beppel this the other day. Like now that you get to go to the cons and you meet people like Jeff who've actually seen the movies or who have a connection to the movies, when you do these movies in the genre now, you know the audience. You know, theater's great because you're performing in front of a live audience and you get to actually interact with them afterwards and talk about the play. In film, it's so isolated and
Yeah.
you never actually meet the audience. Now I kind of like, I remember I was doing a Slasher Nurse is my next one that's coming out. It's coming out this year with
Oh, I've
Dave.
heard of that.
Yeah. I had a great little scene in that and then got brutally murdered. It was awesome. I don't want to spoil anything, but it was great. And I remember I was telling Dave Carr, the director, I'm like, this is so awesome because as I do this, I know that there are people out there and I know who they are in a lot of cases. And I know who I'm telling the story for. So that's definitely changed my whole outlook on the on-camera stuff. So I'm excited about all the indie stuff coming up. And the indie horror that's happening now is a lot like Pumpkinhead, Silent Night, Society. That was, even though Pumpkinhead had a pretty decent budget, those were still the indie films of that day, especially Toby's movies or Brian's movies. They were on a shoestring budget. It was pioneer filmmaking. It was practical effects. You know, for Spontaneous Combustion, Toby had his son Tony light up a barbecue in his backyard, literally, put some tinfoil on a spit and poked holes in it and rotated it. And that's the opening credits. He shot it. That's the opening credits of the movie. These flames piercing the darkness. It was innovative, creative filmmaking. You had to think on your feet. You had to improvise. And that's what I'm finding as I work with these indie horror producers now. It's like, yeah, it just reminds me of those days. So there's some nostalgia there, but it's also a lot of fun. And now I actually know what I'm doing as an actor. So
Makes it a little easier. Do you still get nervous like when you're acting, or is the voice work like second, like it's just easy?
No, I do get butterflies still. I
You
do.
do.
I got to be the voice of Mr. Peanut for a couple of years ago. And I remember when I booked that job, I've been doing voiceover for 22 years, but I'd never worked for VaynerMedia, and I was going to be the voice of Mr. Peanut. So I definitely got butterflies before that gig.
Well, that's a major one. I was looking around
Yeah.
here. I have. Oh, hold on. This
Oh
is so
no.
funny. I'm always ready.
God,
My grandmother.
oh, hi, it's me. It was me. Yeah. Hey, Mr. Peanut.
My
Well, I was one of many voices of Mr. Peanut. You know, Robert Downey Jr. was the voice.
oh
They
yeah.
usually do celebrity stunt casting, but once in a while they'll hire a schleb like me to just kind of go in between the celebrities.
I have like 6 of these laying around because you used to get these in mail order. You know, my grandmother would buy all the mail order stuff, and like, so you collected the like little tags off of the cans, and then mail like $3, and you get a Mr. Peanut, and she'd
Mr.
give it.
Peanut Bendy.
Yeah, I know, right?
Bring one of those to FrankenCon so I can put one at my table.
You can, yeah, I should, and then you can sign the back of it.
Yeah, just sit there like
I was trying to see what the year was. 91.
Oh, interesting. Oh, hey, that's great. I made a movie in 91. I can't remember which one. But like, so for that gig, for example, I was nervous because it was a big gig. It was a big client. It was a pretty decent dollar amount, you know. But the thing, and so I think butterflies are important as an actor. They make you do the work. What I've learned over the years is the nerves never go away. The nerves are healthy. If you try to just overcome the nerves, you're going to have a mental block because they're a part of being human.
Yeah.
But what makes the nerves not show absolutely is preparation. It's education about what you're doing. Like I remember driving to that gig for Mr. Peanut and I was really nervous, but then I was like, okay, well, you know what you're doing. You've done this for a long time. You know how to deliver, you know how to take direction, you know how to change the performance if they want to. And as soon as the microphone rolls, and I find this with the camera on set too, I go to work. And so if anything, the nerves serve me because I prepare. I make sure I'm prepared. I have choices, especially with a film script now. I know it inside and out, and then I start making it my own. So you know, that's the only way to really overcome the butterflies. I don't know many actors that don't get butterflies still. It's kind of the exciting part of what you do.
Yeah, I can see that. I was going to mention earlier, I saw an interview with John Cena, and they asked him what his like secret was, and he said, "I never say no. I say
Yeah,
yes to everything." Like he
everything.
was a mermaid in that Barbie movie
Yeah,
for
Yeah.
2 seconds,
2 seconds.
and his agent was like, "Why are you doing this?" He's like, "Why not?"
Everybody was a mermaid in the Barbie movie for my good friend Steve Coulter is if you look him up, you'll know him. He was he's She-Hulk's boss in She-Hulk. He's
Okay.
he really good friend and teacher. He was my teacher, my mentor. Now he's my good friend. He's here in Atlanta. He's in the Conjuring universe. He's the priest in the Conjuring. He's
Okay.
in all the James Wan films. James
Oh.
puts him in everything. He's in The Walking Dead, the show. He was the architect in Alexandria.
Hmm.
I think 2 seasons, and then he got eaten by somebody.
Nice.
But he's been in everything, and he's in Oppenheimer. He's in like one scene in Oppenheimer.
Wow.
It's funny, even his manager, he told this story the other day. Even his manager said, "Well, Steve, why do you want to do this one scene in Oppenheimer?" And he said, "Well, it's Oppenheimer. It's Christopher
Well,
Nolan.
it's Christopher Nolan. Yeah.
Big stars are doing 2 seconds in this movie, you know." And they
I
did.
still haven't seen that, but I've heard
Oh,
like everybody's in it.
it's good. It's long,
Yeah.
but it really is good. The way they deal with the whole atomic bomb thing is really interesting. It's not, I won't spoil it for you, but it's not what you think, like when
Yeah.
the bomb actually gets dropped finally. But it's really good. It
I'll
deserved
check it out.
yeah. And then you see if you can find Steve Coulter, look him up and then look for him in the movie.
Oh yeah. So before we'll do a little bit of society talk, but we have a sponsor of the show, and it's Jason down at the dungeon. So
Hey,
you know Jason.
yeah, all right.
So we love Jason
We
down at the
love
dungeon. He's great, and he has a terrific little physical media store here in Maryville. You can follow him on Instagram at Southland_Dungeon. You can go to East Broadway here in Maryville, hit the roundabout, and go behind Southland Books, and you'll find everything from vinyl records, beta, VHS, DVD, Blu-ray, 4K. Whatever the next format they make, I'm sure he'll carry. He's got video games and just a boatload of stuff. He will also be at FrankenCon.
Good.
He's a good, big supporter of us, and we appreciate him. So follow him over at Southland_Dungeon, and you can find more information at SouthlandBooksAndCafe.com.
Do it. It's a great shop. I got to see it last year. It's unbelievable.
Brian, we did this gym live thing Saturday at the Bird in the Book with Samantha Newark. Have you ever met her?
No, I've not.
You have to meet her. She's done one horror movie called Summer Camp Nightmare back in the 80s, and
Cool.
Jason loves that
I
movie.
think I just watched that.
Yeah, probably.
Recently. I'm gonna look that up because I know I've watched that.
But Jason loves it. So but anyway, she is a sweetheart, and I'm trying to convince Corey into maybe bringing her in next year, just because
Good.
she's amazing. You know, she's really good with the fans. Like, I love meeting people like you and her, and I mean, basically, we've been really lucky with FrankenCon, where we just meet people that are cool. Like, and I feel like whatever energy you put out is the energy you kind of get back,
100%.
And I feel like that's how it's kind of worked with FrankenCon, is like we just get
100%.
really cool people. I mean,
Don't ever change. Don't ever change that. It's tough, especially as you get more and more successful or more visible. You're exposed to a lot of different situations. This is just kind of the way it goes.
yeah.
And you're going to be exposed to a lot of different energies. I found that myself. And you have to remember who you are, maintain your energy, your goal. Always keep your end goal in mind. Like, for me, it's really important to be kind. And there are a lot of reasons for that are personal, but it's really important for me to live my best life that I'm kind. And it's not hard when you're meeting people like you who are also kind, or when you're meeting the fans who are also kind.
Yeah.
Felissa at FrankenCon last year, Felissa and I both I got to sit next to Felissa, who's one of my favorites, of course, and everybody's. And we both had these incredible moments with fans that were just like bringing tears to both of our eyes. And at one point, she turns to me and she goes, "That's what it's about." I'm like, yeah, that is really all it's about. In the con world, there's so many politics and ins and outs and things you have to do, and it's really quite a scene. It's not a bad thing, but it's a business, and it has to be run a certain way and operated a certain way. But at the end of the day, the reason I do it is 100% to meet the fans. And I'll take that with whether I keep doing cons or not. I will always take these last 2 years with me and remember so fondly, and made some great friends.
Yeah.
Made some great
Absolutely.
friends.
Well, I mean,
Who
that's
like
us
you.
with the con. You know, a lot of the people you've met have become our friends. You like Regina and Brad, and
Yeah.
there's just so many great people that we've met over the years. And honestly, that's why I did. That's why I chose to do a year 3, is basically because it makes people happy, and
Yeah.
that's what it's kind of about to me right now. So
I'm very excited to drive to Knoxville a week from
Mhm.
tomorrow.
Oh yeah.
Wait, no, today's
Well,
Tuesday.
with Thursday.
Thursday. A
Yeah.
week from Thursday. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
It's like 10 days. Yeah.
I better make sure I have enough
Like-
movie stills and stuff and Sharpie.
Yeah, you should.
Repack my bags.
So Society is this crazy body horror comedy. It is a weird movie to me. I've seen it a few times. I found it probably 5 or 6 years ago for the first time. But it's an odd movie. What was it like to read the script for that movie?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting question. I think
How do they describe the shunting in a
that's the thing.
script?
They didn't give a lot away in the script because I
Mm.
remember walking onto the soundstage and seeing the big, Screaming Mad George aperture that everybody kind of got in with all the body parts and the
Oh
massive,
my gosh.
and just being like, what the fuck is this? I think I think the scene in the script was just described as, and the rich feed off the poor. It was something very, very simple, and I think they didn't want to give anything away. They didn't want there to be any spoilers that leaked out. Not that they would have at the time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But so we knew what was going on as it was happening. I mean, we're there with all the prosthetics, and we see Screaming Mad George creating all the different things. And I knew that I faked my death, and I knew that, all the things. I knew what was going on in the movie, but I don't think what you can't really know as the actor in front of the camera is what the vision is. Because that's the director and the cinematographer. It's the framing. It's the use of space, the use of color, the use of angles,
Music, the use of music is big in
everything
this movie, I
in
feel.
the movie. So I remember thinking, this is weird, man. This is just weird. But I love playing a monster of sorts, and I always love playing the snob. That was always my favorite thing to do when I was a kid. I loved to be rich, and he was preppy, and I was not rich, but I went through a preppy phase. So I related a lot to the character.
Yeah, I like your glasses.
Yeah, and those were mine.
Oh, they were.
Actually, glasses. I think I still have them somewhere.
That's great.
Yeah, those were my glasses. And so I was a lot like that kid. And so I remember thinking it was weird, but I had no idea of the vision and the tone. Like you can't know that until you see
No.
the finished product. And I do remember seeing that one. Oh man, and we had some great shoots because we shot at mansions in Malibu and on the beach in Malibu. And I mean, it was really fun. It was really, really, really fun. I always say that movie is like a twisted 90210.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, because I felt like we were shooting 90210, except people were spitting up hairballs.
The hairballs are weird.
So it was like, so we knew what was happening. And of course, we saw all the practical effects, but I didn't really understand the theme or the tone. And when it originally came out, they actually would not release it in the United States. They gave it an X rating and wouldn't release it in the US. So it first got released in the UK. And that year that it was released in the UK, it was the #1 science fiction film in the country.
That's crazy.
Because they love class stories. And they
Yeah.
got it. They totally got it, that this was the rich feeding off the poor.
Yeah, no.
Literally. And the whole class structure. So that was always really, really, really cool. But it was weird to make, but it was really fun to make. It was
did they just pour like syrup on everybody at the end?
I was
Like,
gonna say, was the shunting as slimy as it looked?
very and cold, slimy and cold. That's funny. That compound is called methicil, and it's a clear, viscous liquid fluid, and it's what they put in McDonald's milkshakes to thicken them.
Gross.
Yeah, chew on that next time you're at Mickey D's. Well, so it does cover your entire body. It closes all your pores, and it's freezing cold.
Oh.
So for a week on that soundstage, we're all in our underwear, covered in Methocel, and shivering, freezing cold. I think the one close-up I have is when I go, Judge Carter, and I'm shaking like this. My body is literally shaking, and that's 100% real. We were freezing.
I mean, what are your thoughts of the movie? Like, I mean, have you seen it lately? Like, have you seen it in decades or?
I haven't seen it in a while, but I've seen it recently, like within the last 5 years. When
Okay.
it started getting so much attention and traction, I did go back and
In
rewatch
the
it.
Arrow release, I think that was big.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
What do I think of the movie? I love the fans' reactions to the movie because they range from "What the fuck is that?" Man, that's the best movie ever. I mean, the range. And someone said, "Oh, I don't know if it was at Scarefest or FrankenCon, but somebody came up and had me sign something and said, 'This movie is hilarious.'" I'm like, okay, that's a word I have not heard before. I like it a lot because I love
Yeah.
H.P. Lovecraft. I love Screaming Mad George. I have really, really fond memories of the friendships I made. Like that core group of the Society Monsters. We all hung out
yeah.
together for years after that. We kept in
Oh,
touch for
nice.
years, and we'd be on auditions in LA, and we'd see each other out, and we got really close. So I have really fond memories of it. But that aside, I actually really do like the movie because I don't think there's anything out there that's like it, and it makes such an impression, one way or the other. It is one of those movies that you either love or you hate.
Yeah.
But it makes such a strong impression on people. And I like the fact that it has that H.P. Lovecraft kind of vibe, because that's Brian Usna, right? All the way. But also that it has a very clear message. And Peter, speaking of Peter, when he first approached me and started talking to me about doing these shows, he would talk about society. I said, well, nobody's going to know that movie. Like, no, during the most recent political era, it really got popular. And I thought, well, that's interesting. So just the way that it ties into society and talks about society as a whole, I think that's interesting. I don't think you find a lot of movies that have so many things you can enjoy. You can enjoy it on the surface, or you can really think about what it's saying, or you can just look at it as fluff, body horror, like you said.
Yeah, I mean that's what kind of the way I look at it. I just and like when the guy like gets his mouth sucked and it's like it's just hilarious.
Yeah.
It's so weird.
Turned inside out. It's
Oh yeah.
there's some nutty stuff in there.
Yeah. So you've told me a story before about a show you did back, I guess it was back in the 90s, where you met, I think, Clive Barker, but it was can you tell that story or do you want to?
It's funny because I met a guy who actually had a picture of this moment at Scarefest. He was at the con.
Oh my gosh.
It was unreal. And I have the picture. I couldn't believe it because I tell this story a lot. And I was actually in the elevator at Scarefest going up, and this guy next to me goes, "Hey man, I have a picture of you at this con in Los Angeles back in the late 80s, early 90s, where you're in the butt face thing." I'm like, "What?" He said he was there. He's an agent now. He said he was there, but he was there as a fan because this would have been years ago. So basically, very long story short, there is a moment in time where one of the characters in the movie turns himself inside out and his face comes out of his butthole. and he like tries to scare people. And so he's kind of called the butt face or whatever. After we shot the movie, Yuzna was doing a con. It was, and Sean told me the name of the con too, and I can't remember it now, but it was in Los Angeles, like a Fangoria con or a horror con or Comic Con or something like that. And Brian wanted to promote Society. Well, the actor that actually played the dad, who does become the butt face, I don't know. He couldn't do it. He couldn't do the show. So Brian called me. He's like, "Hey man, I'll pay you $800 or $600," which at the time I was like, "Yeah." Will you come down and get in the prosthetic and sit at the table in the booth, and talk to people in that character? I'm like, "Sure, man." I mean, I did anything for a sandwich back then. So like, yeah. So I went down and we're at the con. They put me in the Screaming Mad George is there. They put me in the prosthetic and everything. And I'm at the table and oh my God. I mean, people were throwing peanuts and trying to get them into my mouth. People were throwing all day long and, just laughing and making fun of me and like trying to taunt the butt face. And I was totally in character. I mean, I was really doing the thing. I was acting. So it was about the middle of the day, I guess. And Brian Yuzna says, "Oh, hey, there's someone I want you to meet." I'm like, "Oh, great." Not even thinking about the fact that I'm in this. Here's my feet. Here's my butt. So he lifts me up and he helps me like walk over to the booth next door. And it's Clive Barker. I'm like, oh my God. And fake teeth and everything. I'm like, Mr. Walker, it's so nice to meet you. And I was terrified and shaking, you know, and he goes, "Oh, nice to meet you too." And that was the one time and the only time that I got to meet Clive Barker. And,
I
you know,
feel like
I'm sure he remembers it.
I feel like Buttface would have been a good Hellraiser character. They should
I
have.
totally. Yeah. Well, there's some
Uh,
great effects in the movie. And if you watch any of Screaming Mad George's stuff, like his studio stuff, his behind the scenes stuff, he's got a lot of the prosthetics still in the studio, like the hand head
oh yeah.
always sits behind him. So it was really creative. It was super creative. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's what I love about it. Yeah, the hand where he's like, it's just a gigantic hand on his
If you
on
haven't
his
seen
head.
this movie, you must run out and get it right away.
Yes.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
will make 0.02 cents if you do. I appreciate it very much.
Well, Brian, I really appreciate you, sir, for just being you, man. And I'm so glad we found each other, and I'm so glad you're a part of FrankCon again this year, third time in a row. And you just make the con better, like you just do. And I appreciate you taking the time out for the podcast. And everybody, if you want to support us, just look up Night of the Nerdy Laser on Facebook, Instagram, all that jazz. If you want to watch the video version of this, it'll be on YouTube. Oh, by the way, I forgot to do this. Did you know I did some digging? And there was a Society 2 planned, right? Like, I don't know if you knew that. But there was a script floating around, but there was actually a comic book. And I don't know. So I found all the dates I found was 2003. It's on the internet. It is on the web.
Wow.
And here's some pages from it. So if you're looking at the video, they have 3 pages on their internet, on their webpage that is Society. And it's they're out of like the UK. Oh, that's the wrong thing. But yeah, it's crazy. I don't think it ever got finished. I don't think it ever got finished, but I think I'm going to try to contact the people though.
You should do
because
it.
they have a contact thing. I'd love to know the story behind it.
That's funny because did you know Brian Yuzna almost directed Nightmare on Elm Street 2?
Oh man, that would have been crazy.
It would have been different.
Yes, much different.
The one with Mark Patton. But he told me this on the phone the other day. But he was actually working on another project with Stuart Gordon, and so he couldn't do it. But he was offered it first. So how about if that had been a Brian Yuzna?
Well, it would have been much crazier. Even though that movie is kind of crazy, I feel like there would have been way more practical effects in that one.
Somebody I think brought me a comic book of Society. And maybe
it's called Party Animal is the name of it, but I can't find a full version of it. I can't really track anything down, but I think I'm going to try to do some research and try to pick this thing because I mean, you know, if they do have some sort of version of it, that'd be great. I mean, I don't know why they haven't released it, or you know, maybe they lost the rights or whatever, but yeah. But anyway, I appreciate you, Brian. Thank you for coming on.
You, Richard. Jeff, I'm so glad to meet you. I hope I get to meet you one of these days out in Colorado or down at the show. Yeah.
He does. I try to get him to go to those big cons in Denver, but he won't.
Oh yeah.
But there's a bunch of big cons.
There are, yeah.
He knows more about them than I do.
That's true. I'm like, hey, there's a con in Denver this week, and he's like, oh, really? But yeah, thank you everybody for listening, and thank you, Brian, once again. I'll see you in just a week and a half or so.
I want to thank you
party.
For all your
we'll be party animals. Oh yeah,
animals within reason. I also want to take a minute to thank all you guys listening and watching, because you guys really are why we do it, and it really has enriched my life beyond words. I can't even explain how this has changed my life. So thank you guys, and I look forward to seeing you all at FrankCon.
Yeah, for sure. And until next time, what should they do, Jeff?
Keep it bloody.
Or be in a shunting. I don't do
Yeah,
a
or keep it
shunting. I don't
slimy.
know. Yeah, keep it
True.
slimy.
Oh God.
Keep it slimy.
Go make spaghetti.